You found us through fly fishing. You'll stay for our passion and the community. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it. How come fly fishermen don't get it?
You only haul with the short power snap.
Look for where people walk and the insides of bends and hunt those.
The roof flew off and the interior walls got sucked out. And the trees are just coming up. And I mean, he's clearly not going to clear the trees.
It is not a fly fishing story. It's a story about me trying to understand my brother through fly fishing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
We've been waiting for you. Follow our guests, follow us on Instagram, and share this episode and the love if you enjoy this podcast. And we are live in 3, 2, 1. How you guys doing?
Doing great, Dave.
Doing fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on here, you guys. This is, we've been talking a little bit about this, getting this ready, and I'm excited to dig into Togiak because you guys are in one of those places that's well known around the world for fishing, for salmon, rainbows. And so we're going to talk about all that today. Before we jump into the lodge, how you guys came to be there, maybe start us out with fishing. What's your first memory? Maybe talk about just kind of fishing in general and then how you kind of got into the fly fishing stuff.
Yeah, I'll lead this one off. So my earliest memory was fishing with my dad on a small lake just outside of Olympia, Washington. And at the time, he had a 12-foot inflatable Achilles with an old two-stroke 20-horse Mercury on it. And he would actually wedge me in between the pontoons and my walker when I was a toddler. And we'd go fishing. And I remember it was shortly after that. I was up and moving around. And I remember looking over the edge of that inflatable boat, obviously with a life vest on. I remember him saying, "Now, Zack, don't get too close to the edge because you're going to fall over," right? And you know what's coming next. So naturally, he turns around to make a cast or do something. And I'm leaning as far over the edge as I can. And into the drink I go.
Oh, wow.
I remember him reaching in and grabbing my life vest and pulling me back on board. And naturally, I was freaked out. And I think he thought the whole thing was pretty amusing. But suffice it to say that I've been on the boat literally since I can remember.
Wow. So, and how old were you there again? What age?
I mean, probably 3.5.
That's it. So I'm assuming, your dad, I'm assuming, is a pretty extreme angler. If he's doing that, that's pretty awesome.
To say that he is obsessed might be an understatement. Yeah.
There you go. That was very cool. All right. And so Jordan, no, so that was Zack. So get us clear. Zack, that was you?
Correct.
Okay. And Jordan, what is your first memory similar?
Well, not necessarily. Now, there's a bit of a contrast between Zack and I. And for those who are curious, we are brothers. I tend to assume that most people know that, but a lot of people don't know that. So him and my dad definitely have more of a passion for fishing than I do. I love to fish, but just not quite as deeply as them. So I have lots of memories, with my dad on the boat. The ones that come to my mind are fishing here on the Nisqually or going over to Banks Lake, which we always used to do as a family. But the ones that stick out to me the most are with my brother. And it's kind of when we were, cutting our teeth, so to speak, on really learning how to salmon fish. And at our disposal was not just one, but two Achilles inflatables. So we had our dad's old, like 85 or 86 12-foot Achilles inflatable, like Zack was saying, with the two-stroke 25-horse start. We'd run that on the Nisqually prop, and that's a small river. And we never really got ourselves into too much trouble, but there were a couple times where we just did really well on kings. And, at the time I was probably maybe 9 or 10 years old. And I remember thinking, like, this is pretty cool. I feel very independent right now. You know what I mean? We got a smaller one. We have a 10-footer as well. And we ran that with a 6-horse, 2-stroke Merc prop all the way out into Puget Sound, which is probably 6 miles from where we launch, and some super shallow stuff. And in hindsight, we had no business doing that. So I think I tend to latch on more to like the total experience, especially with the boats. The fishing is great, but I tend to focus more on the experience as a whole than specifically the fish.
Do you remember how old you were?
Oh,
for that, for that adventure out into the Sound?
Probably 10. Yeah, probably 10 or so.
That sounds about right. 10 to 12. I was a teenager. Yeah. I bought that 2-stroke Merc off of Craigslist, and it was terrible and beat up, and we did all sorts of adventures in that little boat.
Yeah,
that was great.
Regarding fly fishing, though, I mean, I had zero interest in fly fishing until my first year in Alaska, which was 2016. And, one of my buddies up there who I'd become acquainted with was from Idaho, and he offered for me to cast his 8-weight off the dock. And to be honest, I had always like put my nose up to it and like, I'm not going to do that. And I tried to cast a few times, and then it was like immediately a challenge. I'm like, okay, I might need to learn how to do this. And so there was a vet guiding on the Togiak for like 25 years. And he's the one who ended up teaching me how to cast. And there's so many silvers in the river in August and September that you don't have to be able to cast well to catch fish. And so that's also the benefit of learning in a place like that, is it's a target rich environment, and you learn so much quicker when you're actually like around fish. Like it's a drive, like when you can see them, or you're trying to fish surface flies and get those explosions. Like it gives you incentive to learn quicker, if that makes sense. And so that first year I caught a couple silvers on Lodge 8 weights, and then at that point I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to get my own setups. And then from there, like I would much rather go and target like largemouth or smallmouth in the springtime on my fly rods, or kind of cherry pick my free time during the summer and go target rainbows on my fly rod instead of focusing on like the bread and butter that our guests are there for. Like the silvers are fun and stuff, but like I'm to the point now where like I want to go throw streamers for giant rainbows. Like that's my jam now. So I'm a little bit more maybe eccentric or more niche
than you were.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, than you were. And you guys have some giant rainbows. That's one of the things you have up there, and you're at your lodge is some really big rainbows.
We do. Yeah, we definitely do. The Togiak isn't nearly as known for large rainbows as a lot of the other Bristol Bay drainages. And I don't know that we have the numbers that some of those other rivers do, but we have some especially large specimens in there. And I think the rainbow fishery, it's safe to say, is largely untapped.
Oh, super untapped.
The upper reaches of the drainage, we'll say from like river mile 20 to 25 or so upstream to the lake, which is at river mile, it's probably at river mile 80 or 85. All of that is wilderness area, and it's National Wildlife Refuge, so it just doesn't get pressured at all. It's not like the Naknek or the Kvichak that have lots of different operations, and they're targeting those rainbows. Where our lodge is at, down in the lower reaches of it, we're on the upper edge of tidewater. Those fish are highly migratory. They're following smolts around. They're going to be where food source is at. But when you figure out where the food source is at, there are some monsters in there. And in previous years, it's only been really an afterthought for us. Most of the people are there to target salmon. They'll catch the limit of salmon or catch and release salmon until they're worn out. And then they go, hey, could we go maybe look for some rainbows? And it's oftentimes been guys who aren't especially driven to catch rainbows, but they're there, and when in Rome, do as the Romans do, sort of thing. So we're excited to really dig into that and see just what the potential is, because even without trying, we're running into these big fish fairly. So
yeah, because they're hanging out, right? The rainbows during the certain time, they're hanging with the salmon, right? Eating eggs and things like that.
Exactly. And it's cool where we're at because we've got all 5 species. The chums will come in and they'll start spawning. And so the rainbows will be in behind them eating eggs. And then the kings are spawning a little bit later and a little more spread out. So if you can find spawning kings, there's rainbows in behind them. And then the pinks start spawning. And so you kind of go through this cycle of, eggs and flesh, eggs and flesh, eggs and flesh. And you get multiple different opportunities throughout the year to target them in different ways. And it just kind of repeats itself 3 or 4 times a summer. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is great. No, I'm excited. I think that, I want to hear today, about the operation and the fishing and everything. And maybe we could just start there on that. Like if for somebody that doesn't know it, I mean, I might be able to get up there, I think this next summer and maybe experience it, and share more of it as we go here. But for somebody who hasn't been up there, hasn't seen it, maybe hasn't even been to Alaska, how do you describe, they're coming up there, that experience? How do you, describe that to somebody?
Our words will not even come close to touching what it is actually like to be there in person. It's hard to explain what it is like there, especially in Togiak. And I can't tell you how many times we've had guests that have, traveled Alaska a lot, and maybe they bring a grandchild or a son, niece, nephew, whatever it is, who have never salmon fished. And it's like, dude, you're in like the Mecca right now, and it's Togiak specifically. It's as remote as you can get, and it's pristine. It's pure. Like, it's untapped, and it hasn't been altered by man. Like, it's as wild as you could imagine anything being, you know what I mean? And it's for some people, it's hard to like wrap their minds around that, because we don't really have that here. Like, sure, there's areas on the peninsula or wherever that you can take float trips, and it's beautiful, and it is largely natural, but there's still a lot of people around, right? And that's the difference here, is like you are completely in the middle of nowhere, you know?
Yeah. I think I'll chime in on that and add to what Jordan was saying. Like, the wild factor, I think, is what is most, like, that's what most affects a person when they get up there. The scenery is beautiful, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't say that in Southwest Alaska that we have, you're not looking at timbered forests and stunningly big trees or anything like that. In fact, it's a little bit more barren than I initially expected when I went up there.
Yeah.
I picture more New Zealand.
Yes, absolutely.
But it is everything that a teenage boy who grew up, let's say, in the Midwest or on a farm in Eastern Washington, who's been reading Field and Stream and Gary Paulson novels growing up.
Absolutely.
Like, it's everything they imagined Alaska and the wild would be when you show up, in a way that, like, is kind of overwhelming. And it's an emotional, for me at least, because that was me. Like, as a teenager, I dreamed about Alaska. I don't even really know that I had any idea what Alaska was actually going to be like, but I wanted to go somewhere wild. And when I got to the lodge, like, it was that in an overwhelming, very emotional sort of way. So we like to say that we cater to the teenage boy who's grown up into an adult, or the teenage gal for that matter, who has dreamed of seeing something truly wild, truly untouched by man. And I think that's what we have at Togiak.
Wow. It's
pristine.
Yeah. It is for sure.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah, no, and as you look at it on a map, you see really where it's at. I mean, it's not anywhere close to Anchorage. It's in the middle. It's probably closer to Bethel, which is way out there too. So you're there. I'm going to talk about a little bit how you get there, but talk about, you just described it. This is like a dream come true. I mean, how do you guys find yourself where you are now running this lodge? Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, that is a very long story, so I will do my best to make it succinct. Our first exposure to the lodge was on an episode of Larry Zonka's North to Alaska, and that probably would have been in 2006 to 2008.
Oh, okay. Is this a YouTube show or a TV, or what is it?
It was a show that was on Fox Sports Northwest every Saturday when we were growing up.
I remember Larry Zonka. He was a football player, right?
Correct. And he was the host, and so they'd go fishing or hunting somewhere different for every episode. And it was always in Alaska, right? And so around my sophomore year in high school, sitting down on a Saturday morning with my dad, watching the show, and we'd salmon fished a lot here. That was kind of, our driving passion. And they're on the Togiak, and they're fishing for kings. And they were chrome bright, beautiful kings in tidewater, in this wild place that nobody else could get to. And that was our first exposure to Togiak River Lodge. And I remember my dad and I looking at each other and just going, man, someday we want to go there. And, we grew up pretty humbly. My dad was a machinist in the shipyards. He made decent money, but he worked really hard to support us. My mom worked really hard as well, but there wasn't lots of extra money, and that was fine. We lacked for nothing. We did a lot of fun things here, but it was always a dream that was probably going to be unfulfilled, right? It was just this thing that we would talk about and dream about. And it didn't go any farther than that. But I remember we talked about that for years after that. Man, remember that episode up there? Well, flash forward, I'm 21. I started guiding here in Washington for salmon and steelhead on a number of Western Washington rivers, the primary one being the Nisqually, the smaller river that Jordan and I both grew up on. And I just by chance ran into another guide. One day, it was in December, we were fishing for chum salmon of all things, and it was a large group of military guys out on a big joint trip. I think there were 3 guides involved, and anyway, we're at shore lunch, and everybody's chatting and getting to know each other. And this other guide, I knew who he was, but didn't know him, and started talking about, fishing in Alaska and all sorts of different things. And he guided at Togiak River Lodge. And he goes, well, would you ever want to guide in Alaska? And at this point, I'm a 21-year-old punk fishing guide who really has no idea what he's doing. I mean, if we're being honest about what's going on, right? But I'm loving it. And so he goes, is this something you want to continue to do? I said, man, I love this. So yeah, I want to keep doing this. And he goes, well, would you ever want to go to Alaska? I said, man, what young startup fishing guy doesn't want to go to Alaska? I said, I've never been, and I really don't know anybody who's up there, with any sort of operation. I don't have the means of the ways to get myself there to do any sort of business. And he just kind of chuckled and he goes, well, what would you think about working for a place called Togiak River Lodge? And I immediately, I knew exactly where he was talking about. It's the only lodge in the river. I dreamed about going to this very place. Of all the places in Alaska, this was the one place that I had kind of fixated on. And so I was like, well, I know exactly which lodge you're talking about, but what do you mean? What are you talking about? And he goes, well, I worked up there for a number of years and I know the owners pretty well and I can get you a job if you want one. And so I was just like, well, yeah, this sounds great. Well, I didn't have my Coast Guard certification. I didn't have my OUPV license at that point. Hadn't started the process to get it. And really, like I said, I was just a young punk fishing guide who really didn't have his stuff in order. And this guy stayed after me for like a year and a half. Like he'd call me every month. Hey, you got your license yet? Hey, you're ready to go. And finally, I got my slow moving button gear and I got my certifications and called him up and said, hey, Nick, if you could still pull that string, I'd love to go up to the lodge and work. And he goes, yeah, I'll call Larry, the previous owner. And so he gets on the phone with Larry. I think Larry called me, 45 minutes later, an hour later, goes, when can you come up? And I said, do you want to have like an interview? Like, do you want to meet me or go fishing or know anything about me? He goes, no, I trust Nick. Come on up. And so 2015, that would have been spring of 2015. I'm getting ready to go up there. And that's how we started. That's how we got up there. Jordan and my dad, obviously they're, living vicariously through me at this point, wanting to know updates and how it is and this and that. We got into probably early July. And Larry, the previous owner, myself had a conversation one night. He goes, who are you bringing up to visit you? And I said, well, shoot, Larry, I can't pay for somebody to come up here and go on a trip. I'm just a young fishing guide. He goes, no. He goes, who are you going to bring up in between seasons to visit you? Well, evidently I had missed a memo or an email or something along the way because he would allow staff members who were staying the whole summer to bring up, a limited number of friends or in between our two defined seasons to hang out and fish. And they're not getting the full client experience for sure, but just come enjoy it.
Sure.
So, we no sooner had that conversation. I got on the phone with my dad. I said, what are you doing the end of July, mid to end of July? And it was just silence, stunned silence. Well, why? I said, because you and Jordan can come up and we can have our, week-long guys trip in Alaska that we've always dreamed about, and it's not going to cost us.
Wow.
And so we did. They came up, and it was that magical you're in the wild experience that we had all dreamed about and talked about and fantasized about for so long. And the rest, I think, is kind of history. I'll let Jordan weigh in on his role thereafter and how we got.
That's amazing. By the way, Zach, that is an amazing story. The fact that you were able to just by, it always seems like it's luck, but I know it never is. You put so much time, everybody does, to get in the position to be lucky. So I'm sure that's what it was for you, but that is really a cool story.
Yeah, it would make a great film one day, maybe. At least in my mind it does. But anyway, so I was 17 when I went up there the first time in 2015. I was coming into my senior year of high school, and I brought a GoPro. I mean, who wouldn't, right? And so I filmed everything while I was up there. And I was, when you're 17, like I was having a really hard time with figuring out what the heck I wanted to do after I graduated. And I was running a landscaping business while I was in high school. And I knew for a fact that I didn't want to do that, right? But anyway, I'm filming up there. And on the last day of Larry, the previous owner, asked if he could fish with us our last morning, which of course we said yes. It was awesome. I kind of I very much looked up to him, and I had never really been around people with that much authority or success or whatever. And so very impressionable on me. Anyways, I'm filming, And maybe like halfway through our morning, he looks at me and he says, or he asked me, would you have any interest in working up here next summer? I said, well, of course. And he said, I can tell that you really, have a passion for filming. I'll hire you as a videographer and you can film guests each day, for a half morning or a day or whatever. And then we can turn their trip into a DVD and then they can take it home with us. And it's really it's cheap marketing. Like we'll make it complimentary. They're already paying a lot of money to be here. So the marketing expense will more or less be your wages. And he said, get some, go back, see what kind of classes you can get under your belt and experience, etc. And I just kind of like light bulb went off in my head. I was like, I had never thought about this, but I think that maybe I want to go into like video production for outdoor related companies. It just like instant light bulb, super cool. So I got back, enrolled in a couple different classes. I got a camera, and pretty quickly I was like, yeah, this is cool, man. Like this is really cool. And so incredibly blessed. My parents, for my graduation gift, they found this company in Ohio that specializes in production and editing classes for people who want to get into outdoor film for hunting and fishing shows, like on Sportsman Outdoor Channel, that kind of thing. And so they bought me a 4-day editing class so that I would kind of have the foundational skills before the next summer. And I'll tell you, that class was overkill, but it was awesome. Like it just like lit a fire for me for production that like to this day, I still have that passion. Anyways, so the next summer I get up there and I, after our startup and getting the lodge process was over, I filmed almost every single day, for the whole season. And so I would spend 3 to 4 days out of a 5-day rotation filming, and then I'd spend 1 full day editing, and give or take a day or so, but I tried to be as thorough as I could with the time and the content that I had. Like I really wanted it to be as good as possible. And so with doing that, right, like I got to meet a very large portion of our guests because I'm hopping around boat to boat. Like, so I'm getting this interaction with guests way more than even the guides do. Like, sure, the guides have the regulars that they fish each year, but I'm getting to meet a lot of people. And so I did that the first summer. Larry decided to have me do it again a second season. So now I'm very acquainted with most everybody who's repeat customers. And I come into my third season and I get up there. I have a bunch of new lenses. I have a new Sony mirrorless camera. Like I've spent a lot of money on stuff for the season, anticipating that is what I would be doing again. And I get there and Larry tells me, well, we're going to do something a little different this year, and you're not going to film, but you're going to help me do my job. And I was just like appalled. I was like, dude, you waited until I got here.
Right. You're pissed.
Yeah. I'm like 19, 20 years old. I'm like, I don't have any managing experience. Like what, why, and it just, the whole thing was just like bizarre to me.
Well, and I just a brief little bit of backstory to make this sense. It was a family-run operation. Larry and his wife Patty.
What was Larry's last name?
Larry Lund.
Larry Lund. Okay.
Larry Lund and his wife Patty, and then his son Kevin would run this operation. And Patty would come in for short amounts of time. It really wasn't her jam. Larry was at retirement age, and he is a fishing nut, a king salmon junkie. Like this was his dream as well in a lot of ways. But he's at retirement age. He's ready to just be done. It's been successful. It's been fun, but he's too tired. And there were some family dynamics there, as there always are, small family ran operations that made things difficult at times. And so for Jordan, that was there was a little bit of shell shock. Like,
yeah,
say what?
Yeah,
right. He was grooming you guys.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, and for me, we didn't, on the guide end of things, we never had a lead guide. We never had a head guide. There was a leadership void there, at least in that part of the operation, and nothing against Larry in saying that. It's just, that's what it was. And for me, like I liked the needed to be done. And so I just got them done because, it was a lot easier to have them done and it was better for all the rest of the guides. And so real quickly, I was in charge of ordering and inventorying all of our consumables that the guides were going to go through at the lodge. And that turned into, then we were involved with trade shows, and I think we kind of assumed assisting in management just because we were passionate about the place.
Yeah, I mean, super passionate and just taking initiative because we wanted the guests to have the ultimate experience even before we owned it, right? Yeah. So I get through that summer 2018. It was tough. Like
it was a rough summer for you.
I didn't really enjoy it. It was my first. If for anybody here who's listening who has experience managing other people, it's tough, man. Like,
yeah, it's not an easy job.
Employees can be really difficult. God bless,
especially team.
Yeah, and so anyway, we get done with that season, and so we're doing trade shows that winter, and Larry more or less asks if I would come back in the same capacity, and I said I will, but here's the thing, like I want to continue filming, like I want to run a production company. I'm trying to grow a production company, so here's what we'll do. I'm going to write my job description, and Larry was just a great guy, and we had an awesome level of trust between each other, and I told him, I said, I'll help you with your stuff, but I'm going to shoot content each day because like I need to do that for my own skills. It'll be lodge content. It's a win-win for everybody. And so again, I know all the customers from filming. And so it was just like old hat, take phone calls for them, emails, like I'm ordering food, I'm doing all the charter logistics, like helping with payroll and tips. Like I'm doing all of it. And so he's like stepped aside most of the king season 2019. He had a buddy up there and they would just go fish. He'd check in with me every once in a while. At the end of the king season, he left early. He left a week early because he had a medical procedure that he had to deal with, and
which he had never done before. He never stepped away.
Never stepped away, and he left. And he's like, "Okay, you guys, like, you know the drill. Like, just do the thing." And we had reduced capacity, but even so, that last 5-day rotation, like. We had guests there. We were calling the shots. Like, man, this is cool. This is really neat.
It was, and it wasn't how you would generally set somebody new up for success. Like it was pretty off the cuff and unexpected for us.
Yes,
there were the family dynamics with his son that I had mentioned before, and there were some tensions there. And so we're just flying by the pants.
Yeah.
Now, right about the same time, there were some longtime guests that had come up. And usually they would come up every year for silvers. It's a dad-daughter duo. Their first year fishing at the lodge was my first year guiding at the lodge. And we had been paired up and we hit it off right off the bat. Just super sweet people. And over the years, we had come to become very good friends with them. And Larry he'd been trying to sell the lodge for a long time. It had been post-sale because he wanted to retire, and just figured he'd run it until it sold and it wasn't that big of a deal. And so a frequent topic of conversation when they were up there was, hey, has Larry found somebody to buy the lodge yet? And usually it was, no, nobody's really been interested, or, I don't know if he's really ready to let go yet or whatever. And so 2019, this time period where he's getting ready to leave, they're up there for Kings. First time they've been there for Kings. And same conversations come up on the boat, how's the sale process going? Has he found anybody? Well, he had actually had a very serious contender that he'd been speaking to for months, and who he'd included Jordan and I in on these communications and how we would make this process smooth in the event that this deal went through. And for whatever reason, at the last minute, it didn't work out. And so I kind of filled him in on all this. And Ben, the dad, he's in his 80s. We're fishing for Kings. We're back trolling some big plugs down through this run, and we're kind of going back and forth. And he and I, we enjoy giving each other a lot of crap, right? The jokes are flying all day. We're ribbing each other constantly, and which is pretty normal for us. We're having this conversation about the sale of the lodge, and he comes off the cuff with, "Well, shoot, why don't you and Jordan just buy it?" And I said, "Well, shoot, Ben, you're a rich old guy. If you got a couple $1,000,000 laying around, why don't you toss it our way and we'll buy it?" And he just got real quiet, and he goes, "Well, I just sold this commercial property and I'm looking to reinvest. So would you and your brother want to do something like that?" And I could tell that this conversation was different, right? Yeah. But I didn't know for sure. Like, are we still jesting each other? Are we yanking each other's chains? And I just kind of looked at him and said, "Well, Ben, if this is a serious conversation, let's reel these rods in and pull over and have a chat."
Yeah.
And so we did. We sat there in the river, and more or less he goes, "We've seen how involved you guys are already. You have a good understanding of the behind the scenes. What's there, what's not, what's good, what's bad. It wouldn't be a surprise for you to step into this operation. There's nothing that's really hidden from you at this point." and you're passionate about it. So if you had the opportunity to do that, would you do it? Talk about a loaded question, right?
Right.
And I'm just like, whoa, well, yes, I think so. Like, you know, this had been an ongoing joke between Larry and Jordan and I as well, where he'd say, well, maybe you Larsen brothers will buy it someday.
Oh, right.
You know,
Yeah.
and
so this was not a surprise to Jordan when you came back to him and said, hey, here's an idea.
Yeah. And so yeah, that started that conversation process. And that summer overall was tough. You know, obviously we went back, they communicated with Larry that, hey, maybe we'd like to take a look at the financials. We might consider the purchase of this, you know, and he knew what that meant. He knew our relationship with them. And I think all parties thought that, you know, this could work out favorably, but that summer was tough. Larry was gone for the last part of King season. Over our break period between the two seasons, Jordan and I came home to catch a breather for, you know, 7 to 10 days.
Yeah. Was this 2019 or 2018?
2019. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we get a phone call from Larry during that break period. And he more or less says, oh, by the way, I'm not actually going to be there for the last half of the season. You, Zack, and Jordan are in charge along with my son. And we're like, okay,
weird.
This, Larry, there had been enough tensions in the past, and we don't want to get into those.
Sure,
but I said,
sure.
I understand that this could work out well, but it probably won't. And he goes, well, I know, but we've got to do this. And, you know, basically I trust you guys and I think it'll be just fine.
It was a test is what it was.
Sure.
Terrible test.
Yeah.
And so we get through the end of the season, and Jordan and I have both packed up everything we own that's at the lodge, and we're in the process of sending it home because we're not really intending on coming back if things don't change. You know, and this conversation about possibly buying a lodge is going on in the background, but people say a lot of things when they're up there. They're excited, they're in the moment, you know, and we've heard stuff kind of like this before. And so I don't know how seriously we took it.
Yeah.
Kind of just, well, wait and see. If something comes of it, great. If not, then, you know, we'll make other plans, sort of deal. You want to lead into the last part of the story so that we can wrap it up? Yeah,
and just to speed things up, I had left that season early. I was filming in Montana for a production company that does several different shows on the Sportsman Channel. And so we got back, and I got home in October. Finally, I'd been gone since May, and we kind of reconvened, you know, with our prospect two investors, and they had gotten all the financials, etc. They liked what they saw. And so they made a meeting or a meeting date in November to meet with Larry and make a formal offer. He rejected that offer in December. And at that point, we kind of thought, okay, it's not going to go anywhere. I'm busy with production stuff. Zach's guiding full time here. And like, that's what we need to focus on. Right. It's like 2 weeks later, they make another offer. Larry tentatively accepts in early January, and you can see where this is going. This is January 2020.
The start of COVID.
Right. So then we have a tentative agreement, and COVID just stretched this thing out and made it it was really an awful time, to be honest with you. So we finally signed papers May 7th of 2020. And it was like, dude, I don't know how we're going to make this work. Like everything.
Right, and the season starts right now.
Yeah, so the season starts in a month. We have to leave in like 2 or 3 weeks. Like state of Alaska isn't letting anybody in without quarantine. Like it just was crazy.
Right.
And so we just took a risk. We bought all of our airfare for our staff. There were a very large amount of deposits not actually taken for guests. We didn't actually know who was going to come. Like, dude, it was a disaster.
Right.
Like for us to come in as new owners, it was nuts. So, but we made it. We made it work. And because we ran those trips in 2020, because you got to remember, most of the lodges canceled their season and rolled everything forward to the next year. So now you have all these people who want to go, especially because like everybody's got a lot of money in this time frame, right? And everyone wants to go to Alaska. Nobody has spots. So because we ran our trips in 2020, we were able to book completely full in 21, which was exactly what we needed, obviously, is like brand new owners and everything.
And it had never been ran completely full.
It had never been like full the whole season. And so 21 22, and then this last summer 23, we have been like plumb full. I mean, obviously
amazing.
A couple holes here and there, but
sure.
Yeah, COVID was tough for us in 2020, but it made us very prosperous in 21.
Right.
Led to more new repeat customers, etc.
Well, and it was such a blessing in hindsight because it gave us a chance to do a trial run at reduced capacity and, kind of come into our own. What was torturous in the midst of it, really, in hindsight, I'm so glad that it happened that way, because having been tossed into a completely full season or even a 2/3 full season as brand new owners, that would have been rough.
Yeah, so
it would have been rough.
That's the long and the short of it. Our two investors,
short, I guess.
They made it happen. We just got done with our fourth season managing. We've owned it for a little over 3.5 years, and it's a dream come true. It's a wild story.
Wow. And the story continues. That's the cool thing about this. This is definitely the start of a movie. We're somewhere in the middle. People will follow up. But so let's hear about a little more on the lodge itself. So talk about that. If let's just say somebody was coming up there I know, you got July, August, there's lots of different times. What is, say they're coming up in July, walk us through what that looks like. I guess they fly into Anchorage and then take a plane over, drop in. How does that look? Give us that whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all of our trips include airfare on private charters directly from Anchorage to Togiak. So otherwise, you would have to fly back, and it's a mess, man. It can be very frustrating.
Yeah. So you fly directly, and where is the plane that flies from Anchorage into Togiak? It lands right there, and there must be a strip in. Is Togiak? Is that an actual town there?
Yeah, it's an actual establishment. It has about 800 full-time residents, and there is a gravel runway in town that the planes land on, and they pull over next to a hangar, and we greet them with the boats and the trucks, offload everything, get all of our cargo and our groceries, and then it's about a 5-minute drive through the village down to the beach. We launch the boats, load everyone up, and then we run up to the lodge. It's another 15 minutes from the village. So we're 6 miles from the mouth of the river. So more or less that's the logistics. It's pretty involved to get there, but we try to make it as easy and seamless as possible.
Yeah. No, it's great. I see it right now. Yeah, you roll up and then what does it look like? Are people typically coming in there for, say, a week-long trip, or is there a mix of types of trips they're doing?
So we're a little different than most of the lodges in Bristol Bay. Most of the lodges do a 7-day rotation. We do not do any 7-day trips. We do 3, 4, and 5-day trips. 5 days is kind of the bread and butter. It's a happy medium in between, a 3 and a 7-day for those who want to be there a little bit longer and kind of get a taste of everything, but not also have the expense of a 7-day trip as well, which is a big thing. And so, the 5-day trips are definitely the most popular. And here's how the rotations work because of how logistical it is to get people in. We have a set schedule. So if it's someone doesn't call and say, hey, I want to be there July 23rd through the 30th, like we have set days, like these are the dates, these are the time frames where we have our rotations, and then they'll have to make their schedule work around that, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So typically if you had a 5-day rotation or if somebody coming in for 5 days, they would come in on, say, like a Sunday sort of thing. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah. So, it's not day dependent. It's date dependent. So we've had the same dates, the last probably 6 years at this point. So if you're going to fish the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, leave on the 6th. And then the next 5-day rotation begins on the 6th. So when the plane comes in, it's bringing in new customers, and then the old customers get on that same plane and then dip out. So it's a very big turnover of people, and that's to minimize how many planes are coming in, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So for instance, in July this year, we've done this the last couple of years, we've tossed in a 3-day rotation into the mix. So if somebody calls and says, hey, I want to come up, for a little bit of multi-species action in July, I want to catch some kings, but I really want to catch some chums and some sockeyes too, but a 5-day trip is too much for me, then our response is, well, hey, the 16th to the 19th of July is our designated 3-day rotation. That would be the best spot to get you in. If you don't want to do a 5-day, the next option after that, this last year we had a 4-day rotation, July 24th through the 28th. that was something that we set in advance. And then when people inquire, we go, here are your possible date ranges that would work for what you want to accomplish.
Correct. And then it's the same for silvers. Like we have a peak 3-day trip, August 20th through the 23rd. So for those who don't want to go for 5 days, and a lot of it too is like, a lot of our guests are business owners, or they're running like really big companies, and they just can't simply be away from work that long. And so that's why the 3 days are also popular as well, just because people don't have the time. But yeah, we have outside of the 5-day trips, which are the most popular, we do have 3 and 4 day trips that we kind of throw in to the 2 different seasons, just to give people options if they don't want to come. So
makes sense. Okay, so you roll up there in the sled and then you hop in. What is that first? You get to the lodge. Is the first day kind of get settled in and then get dinner and then get ready for the next day? Is that how it looks?
No. So our charter flights are scheduled to leave Anchorage right about 7:00 in the morning. It's only about an hour and a half flight to Togiak. So assuming that weather and everything else is acceptable, a lot of times those clients are landing, by 9:30 or so,
or earlier,
or I'm sorry, 8:30 to 9:00 in Togiak. We a lot of times have everybody back to the lodge by 10:00 or so out onto the water, assuming that they want to do so. And most of them they're chomping at the bit to get on the boat. And so that first day, as opposed to the normal 8 hours on the water, a lot of times they're getting 5 to 6 hours on the water that first day. For the guests that are really like, they want to get everything that they can on that first day, sometimes we'll run dinner a little bit later. Usually everybody's so pooped after that first day from traveling the day prior that they're ready to come in and, have dinner at the normal time. But they get to the lodge. We try and have all of our staff lined up along our boardwalk that connects to the dock as the boats are rolling up. So everybody's greeted as they get off the boats. We direct them into our main lodge where we've got, hot chocolate and coffee and tea and stuff ready to go for them. We bring them in. We do a brief orientation speech / rundown, a little presentation just to go over the do's and the don'ts of the lodge. And they eat, and then they're immediately on the water from there.
That's it. They're on the water. And then are there, talk about that. What do the boats look like? Where are they heading? Let's take that August 20th sort of thing, the Coho. Where would they be hopping in and just heading upriver?
Sure. Yeah. So if we're talking about those August dates, a lot of times the silvers are pretty spread out from the mouth on up to, River Mile 20 or so, where our boundaries at for the Wildernes area. Most of our boats are Northwest style, we'll call them jet sleds, 18 to 20 foot long, open aluminum boats with outboard jet drives on them. I think we've currently got, what do we have up there? We've got 5 20-foot Wildernes XLs, Alaskan XLs with 150 horse 4-stroke jets on them, and then kickers and all the other bells and whistles. And then we've got 3 16-foot Wildernes sleds as well with 60/40 pumps for running some of the real small tributaries. And then we've got kind of an assorted collection of other river boats along the same lines. We've got 2 19-foot North Rivers in the mix, again with 150 horse jets. We've got an 18-foot Willie Classic, which is similar in design to the North Rivers. It's got a 150 horse jet on it as well. We've got a 20-foot aluminum weld up there. We've got 2 18-foot jet crafts. And then we've got a large offshore style jet boat for chasing halibut and other things around out in the bay, and then getting to other tributaries out there as well. And that's a 24-foot design concepts cabin boat built in Northern California originally as a patrol boat on Eagle Lake in Northern California. But it's kind of a mix of two worlds. It's got a big block Chevy V8 inboard jet drive in it, so we can get that across the flats and get out to that big water safely, and then bring it back to the lodge at night so that we're not stuck in town. But as far as the clients getting done with their meal, we introduce them to their guide. They head down the dock and toss their stuff in the boat. And then, it's really at the guide's discretion as to where they're going to go. For the long-time returning guests, sometimes it's at their discretion where they want to go. But it's just, it's water dependent. They head off to where the fish are at. And that could be anywhere from 6 miles downstream to, close to 15 miles upstream from the lodge.
Yeah, traditionally by August 20th, if we're using that as our example date, the water is low enough where, you could go half a mile from the lodge and find a pile of silvers. Like it's typically during silver season, The only reason to go way upriver is just because you want a little different scenery. I mean, there's fish everywhere. You can catch fish pretty much wherever you want to go. It's just like, hey, let's go see something new, because the upper part of, the range that we can take customers, that part of the river is very different than the lower part. Like, it smells different. It looks different. Like, it's cool.
Yeah.
And so we always encourage our guides to take the guests up to the boundary at least once while they're there, just because it is just breathtakingly beautiful.
And is the boundary, when you go up there, is that like an area where you can't you can't fish above the boundary?
Correct. Yeah.
Anybody can fish above the boundary. We can't run guests for hire above the boundary.
Yeah.
Without a wilderness permit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I see. Yeah. So you guys stay for the most part below the boundary for fishing.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got at least 20 miles of the main stem of the Togiak. And then there's another smaller tributary called the Tugiak that dumps in. I would say that's probably river mile 12 or so. And it's small. It's definitely water dependent as far as how far you're going to get up it. But that is another just extremely remote and unique fishery unto itself. That's one of those adventure days. Every group is encouraged to go up at least towards the boundary, if not to the boundary, and enjoy that up there, and then take a day to go up the Tugiak as well, because it's just a completely different experience.
Gotcha. Wow. And then, so as far as the fishing, people are coming, I think you guys have a mix, right? You have some people coming there, like gear fishing, fly fishing. Talk about that. Like, if somebody's coming in thinking about fly, is that, paint that picture a little bit. Do they have all their options open for species and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do kind of a brief rundown of our fly program, if you will. We actually have 3 rotations at the very beginning of our season, starting June 21st, going into July. That is designated. We've designated spay-only. Most of those guys are primarily interested in targeting catch and release kings on the spay rod. Yeah, so we're pretty stoked about that. This season 24 will be the first season that we've had that designated for those guys, because there's been enough interest the past few years to finally do that. So for the guys that want to chase kings on a spay rod, I mean, we have, I don't want to say sole access, but we are the only real players that are on the river on any sort of permanent basis. And it's wide open. So that's cool to start the season. From there on, we'll say, mid-July on to the end of silver season, any given rotation is going to have a mixture of gear and fly anglers. We cater to both, for sure. I think we're probably most well known for our silver fishery on fly rods. We get into mid to late silver season, so we'll say, late August through the first half of September. It's probably 60 to 75% fly anglers.
Yeah.
Or those with a preference to catch them on the fly rod.
Yeah.
And so we cater to all those things. A lot of the time with silvers, we're stripping, big streamers or clousers subsurface, either heavily weighted flies or heavily weighted lines. We kind of leave that to the preference of the angler. Ponds each way for that. But we do a lot of topwater stuff for the silvers as well. Your conventional, pink polywog sort of setup that you'll see in a lot of the Bristol Bay drainages. But we've gotten pretty creative over the years. And we've got some, I'll call them unique patterns. I don't even know what to call them. The silvers love the most unnatural, brightly colored fluorescent that you can come up with. And so it's
pink, right? Pink is good.
Yeah. Well, pink is always good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not matching any sort of hatch, but dude, it is
crazy. Are you guys doing any of the topwater stuff for the coho?
Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely. And it's like anything, it's water dependent, river level dependent. Some years we get into the most epic topwater fishing that you can possibly imagine. Other years when the water's a little bit lower, they're in some of the deeper runs, and they're not as apt to the surface. So just water dependent. But if we get moderately high water at all, there is some exceptional topwater silver action to be had.
Sweet. And what about for rainbows? When would be a good time to hit those for on the fly?
Yeah. I would say, man, I don't know that there's ever really not a good
right, because they're there all the time. It's kind of like they're there early. Are you guys doing the mousing? Is that an option out there?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And that, I would say, if you want to get them on the mouse, the first half of our season.
Yeah, early.
So let's say our June, July season would be the best bet for that. They seem to be, they're the hungriest at that time because there's not a lot of spawning going on. Most of the smolts that they're chasing the downstream sockeye smolts have already exited the river at that point.
Yeah, there's not
Certainly
a ton
not
of
all,
eggs. Yeah,
a lot of them. And there's not a ton of eggs yet. And those fish are coming. I mean, they're post spawn, right? They're spawn in April and May, most of them, the first part of June even, and they are on the chow after. Yeah, we've had some very, very good days on mouse pattern.
that's great. So you could do a June like that time. You could hit maybe some kings and the rainbow potentially.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you could have some really good rainbow fishing. You're not going to have the other bycatch with Dolly Varden at that point in the season. There will be some around. The big push of the sea run dollies comes probably mid to late July. But yeah, late June, first part of July, focus on kings and rainbows. Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's a quality fishery right there.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to hook 100 fish a day, but like the fish that you do get, I mean, they're going to be just rambunctious, trophy fish. You know what I mean? I was just telling someone this earlier today, like, we kind of touched on this earlier, like our rainbow fishery is a super underdog. Like it's not known for catching 30 fish over 20 inches in a day, but you're probably going to have like 4 to 5 opportunities, and one might be an absolute tank.
right.
The chances at a fish over 25 inches, pretty decent.
Oh, very good.
Pretty decent.
We don't.
For sure.
One thing that we've always been very cautious of with anything that we're offering is we don't want to oversell it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I would rather tell you it's going to be mediocre and have you show up.
Yeah, balance expectations, right?
Definitely. And like I mentioned earlier, we haven't dug super deep into the rainbow fishery, but what we have dug into, I think it's there. Yeah, I think it could be really good. And I don't want to oversell it, but the limited number of trips that we've ran specifically for rainbows early season on mouse patterns, it has been quite good. It has been quite good. So there's that. There's the first part of the season. As you get into, we'll say mid-July or so, you've got spawning fish around. Certainly by late July, you've got the chums and the kings that are starting to spawn. And really anywhere that you can find spawning fish, there are rainbows in behind them chowing on them.
Yeah, and the thing with the rainbows too, as you get later into July and August, if you're fishing beads, it can be really hard to weed out the dollies, because the dollies are just
ravenous.
Right.
Of the beads. So like what I was doing during our break period, I was just fishing giant streamers and free drifting them, not stripping or anything, just letting them float. And that for the rainbow specifically, it was much easier to out the dollies. And I wasn't hooking a ton of fish. I was probably getting 3 or 4 opportunities in a couple hours, but they were really good fish.
Yeah, and as I'm sure you've seen, Dave, like when fish are unpressured, they are so forgiving, right? And I think we're extraordinarily blessed to be surrounded by a bunch of fish that are largely unpressured, and they're hungry and they're aggressive and they bite things that, in a lot of places they wouldn't even look twice at.
Right.
It's forgiving. You're in a wild place that's not pressured a whole lot. And
they're not seeing a lot of people.
So you can fish some big, goofy looking, kind of obnoxious presents. To weed out, I don't want to call them the undesirables because those dollies are cool. They are fantastic fish. But if you want to go target rainbows, you can do that by fishing something that's a little bit ridiculous, and they're still all over it.
Yep.
And so that's mid-season. There's a lot of egg pattern stuff going on, a lot of streamer stuff going on. As we get into late silver season, assuming that we have low water, it's really low water dependent. If we can end silver season with low water on the drop, our biggest rainbows of the year every year have come end of silver season. So we're talking, for us, that looks like early to mid-September. We're going to start running a little bit later in the year, here in the years to come. I know there's some operations that will do fly-in trips to the Togiak, and they're running into the first part of October. But if we can get that low water from September 1st on, giant rainbows. And a lot of times we're running into them throwing spinners or jigs or big silver flies, and their incidental catch. That's one of the things moving forward that we really want to go and target, assuming that we have the water conditions, because they're hungry at that point. And for whatever reason, the big fish seem to be around lower in the river when we have low water like that.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, you guys are the only lodge on the Togyak, but people are flying in, or people are getting in there. Is that the case? Because you're the only lodge that shows up on the map.
Correct. Yeah, there are 3 other lodge operations that will fly in their guests on a float plane on a daily basis, assuming that they have the weather to do so. And so a lot of summers, they're there, 40% of the time, and they'll show up at 10:30, and they're off the water by 2, if they can even get there. We like to say that we've had our pick of everything before they've got there. Just
right. And at the end of the day, you could fish later and be there and fish when people are.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
and if there's inclement weather, it doesn't. I mean, as long as the client is willing to go out in it, we're there.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, here's how we differ from those fly-out camps and the other lodges. Like in June and July, I should say late June and through mid-July, the fly-out camps are focusing their efforts on rivers where they can harvest kings. That's where they're taking their guests for the most part. For us, all of our kings are catch and release. And we don't have a focus as we come into July. We don't have a focus specifically on kings. Like, we make it about all the species because they're plentiful. Like, there's so many different fish that you can go and catch and experience. Why focus so specifically on just one? Like, you're in Alaska, you're in the most remote place you could be. Like, get a little taste of all of it, you know? And so the difference between us is that those camps aren't over there until like the first part of August. Like, they might come in. They might come in and do some flossing trips for sockeye or something in late July, early August. We have the river to ourselves.
That whole first season.
The whole first season, and it's awesome.
Oh, wow. So you're not seeing much in June, that early part of the season?
No.
June and July, there was nobody else there.
No, it was us. You know, you have some folks in town that might show up and sport a little bit, but yeah, the other camps are non-existent pretty much. And so that's like, everyone gets super hyped about the silver season and silver trips. And don't get me wrong, that is awesome. That's some of the coolest stuff you'll ever see. But in my opinion, the real underdog here is mid to late July, because the river is full with everything minus silvers. And on the fly rod, you don't know what you're going to catch, especially when you're like targeting like the mouth of the Gishik or the mouth of the Pongo. You're at the mouth of the Tribs, right? Like, everything stacks up there, and you're catching chums and sockeye and kings and pinks. It is like, if you just want to catch fish on a fly rod, it is a target rich. It is awesome. It is my most favorite time out of the whole year to fish, mid to late July.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you don't know what you're going to catch. And as you know, pinks are one. We were just up in fishing for steelhead, and we were hooking pinks, and a couple of those pinks we got were like a serious tug. You know, it was like a steelhead. Are those fish pretty bright that you guys are getting in there?
Yeah, absolutely. As we get into late July, there are a ton of chrome bright fresh sockeye coming in. Most of the kings are going to be a little bit colored up by that time period. We'll see fresh kings all the way into like the middle of August some years, but not in large catchable numbers. The main push of chrome bright kings is going to be before like the 24th of and from the 24th of July through like the 5th of August, it's just a gradual descent down to a trickle. But, you know, let's say mid to end of July, can you go catch a couple chrome bright kings? Absolutely.
Yeah.
The kings that you're going to run into a little higher up in the system at the mouth of those tributaries, I'll call them dusky. Like, they're not ready to spawn yet, but they're not chrome bright. You'll have a mixture of chrome bright sockeye and then colored up sockeye, and you'll have a mixture of chrome bright chums and chums that have been in the system for a little while longer. When our chums come in, a lot of times you cannot see the bars on them. They're so bright.
But they're awesome.
Really,
They're awesome
really
quality.
fantastic fish. And then the pinks, man, I've tried to figure out the pink runs up there. Where we go in Washington, we have decent pink runs, and they're generally on odd numbered years. And on the even numbered years, you'll get a couple. You know, you have some stragglers that are not with the rest of them. In Alaska, the large pushes of pinks are generally associated with the even numbered years, so the opposite of the lower 48. And in the odd numbered years, you have moderate numbers. The last few years on the Togiak, it's been hard to distinguish between the pink years and the non-pink years because there's so many every year.
Yeah, they're so fun.
And they start in late June.
Yeah.
And we have chrome bright fresh pinks coming in well into September. It's kind of the whole summer. And there's waves. You know, there's times where there's not many around, and then all of a sudden there are literally millions. And so you toss those guys into the mix with everything else. Like, on a pink year, on an even numbered year, first week of August probably is when the pinks are at peak numbers.
Yeah.
If a guy wanted to catch, I'm going to throw an outlandish number out there, but I mean it. If a guy wanted to land 200 pinks a day on a fly rod in the first week of August, he could do it if he wanted to work that hard. And I Like I know for the folks at home, they're like, nah, no way.
Right. Too much work.
It's hard to wrap your brain around what that even looks like experientially, right? 100 a day is so many an hour, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Till you get there and you see that potential, like there aren't words.
That is cool. I feel like fly anglers and maybe just anglers in general love a little bit of pain. That's why I like the Chinook or steelhead is a good example, right? Like they're so hard to catch, and that makes it almost more enjoyable in some weird way.
I'm not in any way like making this, hey, come up here so that you can land 200 a day. Like I would way prefer the guys came up, caught 8 or 10 fish, got their butts handed to them, and had a fantastic time. I'm just saying, like that's the level of biomass that is swimming up that river at times.
Yeah,
just
awesome.
So you can kind of try and figure it.
Yeah, that's it. So once you're out and you have a day on the water, so you said, what time are you typically getting back to, and having dinner, getting all that stuff? What's that look like?
Yeah, so boats take off in the morning, and right at 8, we have 2 options for lunch. They can come back for a self-serve deal between 11:30 and 1 o'clock, kind of eat at their leisure, and then get back out on the river, or they can take to-go lunches out on the boat so that they don't have to come back, more fishing time. And then the boats roll back in right around 5:30. Guides either clean fish or get the boats cleaned up for the evening. Guests come in, clean up, shower, whatever, and then we start appetizers are at 6, salads are at 6:30, and then we serve our main course between 6:45 and 7. And then it's just like they can do whatever they would like to do after that. Just go hang out. A lot of people go out on the patio and hang out, visit with each other, smoke cigars. I mean, it's just. Yeah, it's what they want to do with their time at that point.
We've got a number of different options for folks. We do have what we call a large patio deck out in the front yard. We're built on, we're down in the tide flats and it's all tundra, so it's pretty boggy. Like you don't just go waltz across the grass unless it's been an exceptionally dry summer.
Oh, right. Yeah, what is that? Describe the tundra to somebody. Like what would happen if you walked across the tundra?
It would be like walking on a 6 to 8 inch thick sponge that looks dry, but you step on it and all the water comes out of it. That would be how I would explain it.
If we have boardwalks everywhere, so that we don't get our feet wet. But if you step off of the boardwalk and you don't have muck style boots on, your feet are going to get wet.
Yeah. And so to make usable space in our front yard, which overlooks the river, it's right there. We have a very large patio deck. I don't know the dimensions off the top of my head. It was big enough where we used to play basketball games on it. We had a basket back in the day. But at any rate, we've got that set up as a kind of an outside lounge area. We've got deck seating out there, and then we've got a fire pit area as well. So on the nights where the weather or the bugs will allow, we'll do fires and stuff outside and hang out outside. We've also got a large front porch on the main lodge. I'm trying to remember the dimensions of that. I want to say that thing is 60 by 20, something like that. So there's outside hangout space there. Each guest cabin has a porch on the front of it for the same sort of thing. And then we've got a lounge hangout area in the main lodge. We've got 4 couches in there.
Yeah.
We've got books that people can read. We've got games that they can play. There's satellite TV if they want to watch it.
We got a sauna as well.
We've got a sauna that people have access to as well. So there's stuff to keep people occupied in the evenings. Most of the time, though, they're pretty pooped and people are in bed pretty early, surprisingly.
Yeah. A lot of the feedback we get is like people just love how like remote and how quiet it is. And so they really enjoy just like going back to their rooms and just reading a book and just like enjoying the fact that they're in the middle of nowhere. They're in the middle of nowhere, but they have hard walls around them and their own bathroom. And it's cool.
Well, and I forgot probably the most important question that a lot of people are going to ask is, can we fish after dinner? And in a guided capacity, generally the answer is no, unless for whatever reason they were delayed getting in or there's something else that arises that we handle on a case-by-case basis. But we have rods and everything rigged up, ready to go. People are more than welcome to fish off the dock or off the bank, either in front of the lodge or upstream of the lodge. And sometimes some of the best rainbow and Dolly Varden fishing occurs right in front of the lodge.
Oh, yeah.
Also, some of the best king fishing, depending on the year, occurs right in front of the lodge. It is a tremendously good king staging zone. And so a lot of evenings we'll have 6 or 8 bank rods, lined up, plunking rods, so to speak, rod holders right off the edge of the bank, and everybody's hanging out on the porch telling stories and
there you go.
Talking about their days, and the bank rods are going off. Or during dinner, everybody will be sitting there eating dinner, and all of a sudden a bank rod goes off and the lodge empties and everybody runs out to, see what's on the end of the line. So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
There's a little bit of everything for everybody, depending on what they want to do.
Gotcha. And is up there, can you keep certain species of salmon? Can you take home? That's a pretty common thing in some areas, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the daily salmon limit on the Togiak is 5 salmon, any combination of species, with the exception of kings. Kings are not open for retention if they are over 20 inches long. So the state of Alaska allows you to keep what they would define as a jack king salmon. And that's any king salmon that's under 20 inches. Anything above that has to be let go. But for the sockeye or the chums or the pinks or the silvers, coho, if you want to call them that, you can keep 5 salmon per day.
Yeah. So you go 5 salmon per day. So you could come back with a box of salmon if you want. And then you just ship them out on the plane sort of thing.
Yep, we've got lodge provided wax fish boxes that we're happy to package everything up in. Or if a guest wants to bring a small cooler, a lot of times we'll recommend that if they're flying to anywhere farther away than the west coast of the lower 48. We'll package them up in whatever container they want them packaged in. Our lodge limit that we impose is 50 pounds of fillets per person. And there's a couple reasons for that. Most importantly, what we don't want our lodge operation to be is a good old boys club where you just come and load up with as much fish as you possibly can. We are not anti-harvest at all. We are very much pro responsible harvest. Jordan and I both, we love to harvest fish and game for food, right?
Yeah. Not
because it makes sense cost effective wise, but because that's something that we enjoy doing. And so we want our guests to do that, but we want them to know and appreciate that they're in a special place that is wild and it's pristine, and it hasn't experienced the decrease in run sizes that we've seen in other places where, quite frankly, we've overharvested, whether that's on the sport fishing side or the commercial fishing side. And so what does 50 pounds of fillets equate to? Really, that turns into probably 3, maybe 4 days of daily limits on average middle-of-the-road size, let's say silvers.
Right.
So for sockeye are going to be similar in size to silvers on the Togiak. We have large sockeye compared to other places. If you keep 3 days limits, you're probably going to be real close to that 50 pounds per person. And if you're there on a 5-day trip, we just tell people don't feel this pressure to go get your harvest out of the way. If you catch a nice fish or you catch a couple, you're like, you know what, those would be great eating fish. Go ahead and kill them and move on. And by the end of your 5 days, you're going to have a decent pile of fish. Maybe it's 43 pounds. Maybe it's 47 pounds. Don't focus so much on the harvest. Enjoy the harvest. You're going to eat some fish while you're there if you want to. Enjoy the experience and just take all of it in.
Yeah, that's it. And that's kind of what's cool about the king season you guys have set up is that, for me, that's definitely one species I would love to, go for on the fly and get some rainbows along the way, right? I'm assuming people aren't killing rainbows. That's not one of the species that's included.
No. Per Alaska regulations, you're allowed to keep 2 a day. Our lodge policy is that it's catch and release.
Yeah. So I can see that July 8th. And what was that period again? The kind of the last end of June into early July is kind of that Chinook fly season?
It is. Yeah. So that will start this year on June 21st. So the 21st through the 26th, the 26th through the 1st, and then the 1st of July through the 6th. Those will be designated spay king salmon trips. And then if, while guys are there, if they want to go chase rainbows as well, we're certainly happy to do that. I would say really good king fishing, king and rainbow fishing, probably through, just based on peak numbers, through the 15th of July. Like, you're still in the swing of it for the combination of gear and fly guys that will come after those spay rotations. I would say that there are good catchable numbers of kings, like consistently you can rely on it through July 24th. Certainly not in the numbers that you experienced, 10 days prior. And then from, July 24th through the end of July, the kings are slowing down to a trickle at that point.
Yep. Awesome. This is cool. So well, anything else you guys want to shed light on? I know we haven't covered it all today. We've kind of hit the surface, but as far as the experience, what people can expect before checking in with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'd like to say is, when Zack and I started working in Togiak, and this isn't a slight or meant to be disrespectful to the previous management, but it was definitely a good old boys club. It was like Can I take 3 boxes of fish home? Absolutely. And again, like we don't want it to be about that. It's way more. It should be way more than that. You shouldn't be booking a trip to Alaska exclusively, especially to a place like this, exclusively for harvest. And when we started, you could retain kings over 20 inches, and now it's all catch and release, and we love that. Like, we want to protect them, we want to enjoy them, we want to get good photos with them. Like, they're awesome. And the other part of that too is sockeyes keep way better, man. If you're gonna take fish home, take home sockeye over. Like, you can open a package of sockeye 9 months after it's been processed, and it's still amazing. If we could retain king, still, king is not that way. You got like 3 months, and then it gets pretty mushy.
At
the most.
Oh, right. And this is the famous Bristol Bay sockeye, right? I mean, you hear about it. You get the whole the issue going with the mines up above, right, and stuff like that. But this is a famous sockeye area.
Yeah. For those who have gone to Costco and bought sockeye, there's a good chance they've had sockeye out of Togiak Bay. Absolutely. But it's just like we've definitely tried really hard to change the culture since we have taken over ownership. I mean, obviously, Zack and I are both fly anglers. We don't have a preference in one way, but we like to enjoy all of it. And a lot of people will write in and ask, "Oh, are you gear specific? Are you fly specific?" Because there are a lot of places that run one or the other, and we're like, "Hey, it's your trip. Like, we will make it the best wilderness experience that we can based off of what you want to experience. We have no biases. We have no preferences. Like, we are here to just give like the best experience possible based off of what you want to do. And if that means that you have a fly rod in your hand, super. And if not, that's fine too. And if you want to learn while you're there, even better. Like, we will take the time. We'll put you with a guide who wants to teach you. Everybody's got to start somewhere. And that's where I started.
That's it. This is really cool. No, I love where you guys are going with this. And so now it's kind of November. I mean, what for you guys, what's the next now until the season kicks off? What are you going to be doing here the next 5-6 months?
Yeah. So really, this job never stops for us. I think we like to tell ourselves, and we definitely like to tell our wives, that if we work really, really hard through the operating season,
yeah, take time off.
It makes it less busy in the off season. And really that is true, but there's so much going on a year-round basis. So we get home, mid to late September. We take a couple weeks to just decompress, and then it is immediately back into booking and scheduling and invoicing for the upcoming season. That's all got to be really, all those ducks have to be in a row before January 1. So there's a lot of busy work there. Any bookkeeping that we haven't caught up on, over the course of the operating season, we jump into that, make sure everything's right, get all of our tax stuff prepared. And then immediately into, for me personally, I do a lot more of the hands-on stuff. I'm into tackle and gear prep for the next year. And a lot of people kind of look at me funny when I say that, but there is so much work there that you don't realize. We run, at our busiest, we'll run 10 guides, and we run a 75-ish day season. It's 750 guide days on the water that we have to prepare for, be ready for before we ever start. So that's rods, reels, line, old line off reels, fixing reels that are broken, doing all of our tackle preps. So any spinners, jigs, flies, all of that. We do as much as we can ourselves because, a lot of the commercially available stuff is expensive, even on lodge programs. And so there's, for me, I think I did the math. It was like theoretically 13 40-hour work weeks just in tackle and gear and guide and boat prep.
That's a few months right there. Does the lodge stay locked in? Is it kind of like during the winter? Is there people there? Is it just locked down?
Yeah. So currently we winterize and board the place up and lock it up super tight. In years past, we've actually had a caretaker who has lived there the other 9-ish months out of the year. I'm not sure what we're going to do moving forward. This will be the second year that we've essentially winterized the place, and there's pros and cons to each side. When there's a caretaker there, we'll get home, we're like, shoot, we forgot to count this, that, or the other thing. Okay, call up so-and-so, let's have them check it out. Well, when there's no caretaker there, you can't do that. So your preparation becomes very important. And there were a few things when we got up there last spring. We got up there and went, shoot, man, we completely forgot about this or that or the other thing.
Yep. So now it's been, so you guys get up there. When do you guys get up there?
Usually mid to late May.
Yeah, like between May 15th and May 20th, just because we have so many maintenance projects that we've been trying to get caught up on. We got to get there early to get ahead of prep and all that stuff. And then our containers typically show up by June 5th-ish usually. So we send up 2 20-foot containers stuffed full of all sorts of stuff every year. And so life revolves around the barge up there. Like that's how you get all of your heavy stuff in. So it's very difficult to plan for projects and when stuff is actually going to come in because everything is just on such a flexible, fluid schedule up there, you know.
Wow. This is cool. This is the Alaska experience to get a little inside view of you guys. Well, like I said, we didn't hit on everything today. I think we'll have to get you guys back on to talk more about this as we go. But we will send everybody out, like we said at the start. I guess where the best place? You guys just say it yourself. Togiak, right? The TogiakLodge.com?
Yes, TogiakLodge.com.
All right, guys. Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate all the insight here. I'm excited if I'm able to get up there, and I think everybody listening now, it sounds like you got everything going good. So thanks for your time today, and we'll look forward to staying in touch with you.
Awesome, Dave. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, look forward to having you up there.
That is a wrap. You can grab all of the show notes at wetflyswing.com. And please follow us on Instagram and share this episode out with someone you love. Please send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, if you have any feedback or want us to put together an episode on this podcast for you. Check in anytime. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and would love to meet up with you on the water. We have new fly fishing schools going all year long and all around the country. So if you want to connect, let's do it right now. All right, time to get out of here. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great morning or great afternoon wherever in the world you are. And I appreciate you for stopping by and checking out the show today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.